The topic is overcoming Eastern cult bondage. As I was thinking about teaching this to you this morning, it occurred to me, do we realize that 2 decades ago, certainly 3 decades ago, there would have been no need for me to stand and talk about this subject? The incursion of the mystical mindset, the philosophies of the East, had not made significant inroads into America and Western societies. Well, that's all gone by the wayside now. It's kind of interesting this week we're hearing about the woes of Mr. McCartney as he goes through this horrific divorce battle, and it's turned into a he said, she said kind of thing. But as I've been listening to that, I'm remembering, oh, well, a time that goes back more than 30 years when he and George and Ringo were up with the Maharishi. And I happened to be in India at that time when they became, as the Beatles, the evangelists for something that became known as transcendental meditation. And transcendental meditation was really the cutting edge of introducing Eastern religious concepts into Western society. And the Beatles were, at least unwittingly at that point, the instruments of evil to get the whole idea going. Now, what has it done for them? Well, look at the situation. George is dead, John is dead, and Paul's got a really nasty divorce on his hands. It looks like Ringo is the only one that survived with any semblance of sanity in life. It wasn't an answer for them, and it hasn't been an answer for millions of people. And yet it has turned into a massive industry. And in case you don't know, they basically have their own university and own town in Fairfield, Iowa, and have turned into a huge multinational corporation. Notwithstanding the fact that millions of Americans are being seduced daily by gurus of all kinds from the East, and Christians are adopting practices and philosophies that are essentially consistent with a worldview that is non-biblical. So we do need to understand this. If you don't have a friend who has dabbled in yoga or reincarnation, or has flirted with Buddhism or some other Eastern religious philosophy, a family or member, a friend or a member of the family, you are in the minority. Everybody's touched by this today. And so we need to have answers. We need to understand what this mindset is all about. And when it comes to doing deliverance, you won't be involved in deliverance very long until you run into the demons of these religious systems. Because now they have landed on our shores, and because we as a nation, and I speak to Canadians and Americans alike, because we're basically in the same pot here, we have allowed these demons, which were kept out of our countries, now basically to have free reign. And you need to know what these religions teach, what is so dangerous about them, and why we as Christians take a stand against them. So I want to start out with some basic theology, and we're going to focus essentially on Hinduism, though Buddhism will be considered as well. Why do you need to know Hindu theology? Because every single day of your life you're confronted with Hindu theology, whether you know it or not. And by the way, if you do not have Larson's Book of World Religions, well, let me tell you, it is one of the most important books you will ever have. Just to read the chapter in Hinduism, to read the chapter in yoga, to read the chapter in reincarnation, the chapter in meditation, the chapter in karma. You cannot survive as a Christian and apologetically defend your faith in society today unless you know what these religious philosophies are. And you will see when you read this book how so many other religious cults have been touched by them. How many of you know that Mary Baker Eddy, when she founded Christian Science, took it from Hinduism? The whole idea of Christian Science healing comes out of a philosophy we'll touch on in a moment. How many of you know that most of the theosophical and new thought and science and mind cults are all Hindu-based. So you can't escape it. You can't ignore it. You have to deal with it. What is the basic theology of the East? The theology of Hinduism and its variants. Well, one of the first things you need to know is that it teaches oneness. The gurus of the East are fond of saying, all is one. There was a famous line in the Beatles song, I Am the Walrus, which they wrote, McCartney and Lennon, during that time with the Maharishi. I am you or me, I am you as you or me, as we are all together. And that's a fundamental statement of belief in Eastern religion. All is one. What does it mean? It means we're all of the same essence, the same nature, the same being, that there is no separateness in any aspect of creation. All is the Brahman, the ultimate state of universal consciousness. Now, we as Christians do not believe in the theology of what is called immanence. Immanence teaches that God is in and has expressed himself through and is absorbed and part of all that is. In contrast, we as Christians believe in a theology of transcendence. And transcendence teaches that God is not creation, which is the lie Romans 1 speaks about, but that God created. He is apart from his creation. He is transcended from. He is separate. He is not his creation. He spoke creation into existence. He is the Lord of creation, but creation and God are not the same. And you and God are not the same. When I confront New Agers who have bought into these Eastern philosophies, one of the things I always say to them is this: a profound spiritual truth to which many of them have never been introduced, and I'd like to introduce it to you. I have some news for you this morning. God is there, you are here, and you're not him. Pretty simple, isn't it? He's there, you're here, you're not him. He is different from you in nature and character, substance and being. So, we are not all one. We are not an extension of the Brahman, which leads us to the second idea, and that is the idea of absorption or remergence into the one. Or as the Hare Krishna people used to say in the headline of their magazine, back to the Godhead. Now this is the belief that all came from God and goes back to God. All is an expression of God, and that all eventually is absorbed into the absolute that is. You came from the oneness, you return to the oneness. You came from a state of detachment, you return to a state of detachment. You started out as nothing, you return to nothing. And you know, when I talk with Buddhists, I always like to point out to them, it's rather interesting that the term nirvana, which most people think means heaven, doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't even mean a state of bliss. You know, if you ask the average person, what's nirvana mean? Oh, there's this wonderful state of nirvana, bliss. No. The word nirvana means to extinguish, to destroy, to no longer exist. So now think about this. Here you got the Dalai Lama and the Richard Geres of this world running around, all caught up in the joy of the relationship with the Buddha. But their ultimate goal at the end of it all is to become nothing. All that work, all that energy, to be re-merged into the oneness that is. So you start out as nothing, you become something, and you return to nothing. I'm very glad that we have a faith in which we clearly have an individual identifiable destiny. that we shall be known as we are known, and that we will have a relationship with a personal God even deeper than the one we have now. That in eternity we will be somebody, not nothing. Amen? So, the goal of being reabsorbed into the Brahman, the universal consciousness, the oneness, to cease to exist, is to me not a very lofty or noble pursuit. The other thing you need to know about the theology is it's polytheism. Now, Buddhism, which is supposed to be technically agnostic, didn't last that way very long. See, Buddhism was a reform movement against the polytheism of Hinduism and its 330 million gods. But not long after Buddha's death, he himself was worshipped as God, and still basically is by Buddhists of the world. And if you travel to Buddhist countries, you find that they've outdone the Hindus in terms of how many gods they have. They've got it for everything. So polytheism, more than one God, a multiplicity of gods. And the term 330 million, by the way, is not a literal term. It's the term that the Hindus use. In fact, there are many more than that. It's a representative figure to indicate an almost infinitesimal amount of gods. All right? So, the basic theology is it's Brahman oneness, it's absorption into the absolute, and it's polytheism. And everything that a Hindu does, and a Buddhist as well, is designed to accomplish these goals. All right? Now, theodicy. Let's talk about theodicy. If you look at your outline there. That's a theological term. It basically has to do with defending the goodness of God in contrast to the reality of evil. Christians have a systematic theology of theodicy. We believe it is important apologetically to address the issue of the origin of evil and to contrast it to the existence of a personal and a loving God. Hinduism and Buddhism has no theodicy, none whatsoever. Instead, they've developed a system of explaining away the problems of a personal source of evil and definitive consequences for evil conduct. Did you hear what I just said? I think I need to restate that again to make sure that you understand it. As Christians, we have a theology of the origin of each evil and the nature of how evil and what it does in our world is to be addressed. Hinduism and Buddhism simply begs the question and walks away from it and simply doesn't deal with it. They have no theological construct that explains a personal source of evil. In fact, Swami Vivekananda, who was one of the early gurus that brought the movement of Eastern religions to America, used to run big ads in New Age magazines when the New Age movement was getting off the ground. And he would catch everybody's attention with this statement: it is a sin to say there is sin. Because you see, to the Hindu there is no sin. To the Buddhist there is no sin. How can you sin? You are God. And if you don't know that you're God, you simply haven't come to the realization of it yet. Dharma will get you there, and eventually you will be enlightened and know that you are God. If not, as we discuss in a moment, you just have to come back and try it all over again. Now, Christianity addresses the origin of evil. And what does it say? Well, in Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28, we hear very clear descriptions of how evil came into being, how Lucifer rebelled, how he was cast out of heaven, how at one time he was a beautiful creature, the mightiest of all angels, but in his insurrection, God expelled him, and now he is seeking to destroy the plan and purposes of God as a personal, malignant source of evil. It's personal, it's utterly malevolent, and it's directed against the person of Christ. Now, this is the theology of Christianity. But when you walk into the world of Eastern mysticism, all of that is gone. All of that no longer exists. Now, in fact, what they have developed is a theodicy of sorts, because you have gods and demigods and demons and demidemons and all types of denizens of the deep involved in Hinduism and Buddhism. But technically, they're not supposed to have any of that, because there's no personal source of evil. Evil is only what you think. It is all in the mind. There is no devil, and there's ultimately no God, just the ultimate absolute of the Brahman. And there is no consequence for conduct. There is no terminus at which any particular individual must answer to a deity. So what comes out of that then? Well, instead of this, you've got karma. Karma is not a song sung by Boy George. It's a 5,000-year-old concept that is essentially defined as the immutable, inexorable law of sowing and reaping. What does that mean? Well, Galatians 6:7 says, "Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for what we sow we will reap." Well, that's talking about the consequences of sin, and it's referring to the price we pay in this life and the judgment in the next, according to Hebrews 9:27. But the law of karma says there's but a balance between good and evil, and all that you do is laid on one side of the scale, and the balance is constantly tipped throughout your life. And then at the passage of death, the next form in which your life will appear depends on how you have tipped the scales of good and evil. Now, I said it's immutable and inexorable, and that's very important to know, because there is no grace, there is no forgiveness, there is no mercy in karma. If you do it, you pay for it. There's no blood to cover it. It's simply the way it has to be. And so this is why in Eastern societies there's been so little philanthropy and charity. You know, it took Mother Teresa to go to India and figure out that the destitute and the dying needed some help. The Hindus didn't figure it out, because in Hinduism, if you alleviate someone's suffering, you're interfering with their karma. You're getting in the way of the consequences that they have to pay. And if you get in the way of their bad karma and try to stop it, that karma comes on you, and you don't want to do that. So any benevolent thought toward a fellow human being that you find in Eastern cultures has almost always been brought there by missionaries from the West. It is not endemic to that society. The other concept is the belief in reincarnation. Now, let me explain to you something about reincarnation. Any one of these topics I can spend hours on, because there's so much to talk about. You need to know the difference between transmigration and reincarnation. You see, the Western brand that we have, adopted by New Age cults, and as I said, Science of Mind, New Thought, Theosophical Society, and other groups like this, is a perversion of the teaching of the transmigration of souls. The original Buddhist and Hindu teaching is that when you die, you must come back in another life form, unless after millions and millions and millions of lives you sufficiently work out your karma. Now, what you come back as depends on how much good karma you've accumulated. But you will come back in a form, and it could be animate or inanimate. And if you're really lucky, it's animate. And you won't come back as a human being. You'll come back in a higher life form, as a monkey or a snake or a rat. Now, I'm not joking, because these animals are worshipped as God, as higher life forms in Hinduism. Or you might come back as a rock or as a tree. So transmigration, when it was brought to the West, wasn't very palatable, because there are not many Americans who want to come back as rocks and trees, except people in the Pacific Northwest and a few fruit flakes in California. They want to come back as at least human. So they adopted reincarnation, which is actually a perversion of the philosophy of transmigration of souls. But the idea is to work out your karma, you come back over and 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 over again until you get it right. We're born again, they are born again, and again and again and again and again. There's no end to it, basically. The other philosophy that you need to know is the doctrine of something called Maya. Maya is a Hindu term that essentially means all is illusion. In the Hindu worldview, nothing is material. Remember when George Harrison sang about living in the material world? Okay, what was he saying? What was he saying? Well, George Harrison, it's tragic the way the man died and the terrible things that happened at the end of his life, but he had it coming. He basically underwrote the International Society for Krishna's Consciousness for years to the tune of millions and millions of dollars. In fact, the proceeds from some of his record albums, the entire proceeds went to Hare Krishna. He kept that whole cult afloat. So, that song was about Maya. Maya says, nothing is real, all is unreal. It's, by the way, a great religion for schizophrenics. There is no objective material reality. All is spirit. Remember, all is oneness. All is the Brahman. So, when I got thrown off the horse a couple of weeks ago and hit that steel fence and split open my jaw, didn't really happen. There was no steel fence. I just thought there was a steel fence. And if I had realized the steel fence wasn't there, it wouldn't have happened. Now, this gets to sound a little ludicrous, but you got to understand where these people are coming from. So this is where Mary Baker Eddy got the idea there's no disease. And so if you're a Christian Scientist, if you're sick, what do? They give you a mental adjustment. You tell yourself, I am not sick. I don't have pancreatic cancer. I will not die. And they believe it. And most states have laws protecting their right to teach that philosophy. Borrowed it from Hinduism. Now, why is this so important? Because there's no objective reality, there's no material reality, so if you see suffering, you're not seeing suffering. So if you walk down the streets of Calcutta, India, and there's a beggar with open sores and an emaciated body sitting in the gutter, are you going to help him? No, because he's not really there. You're detached. And Buddhism is the worst form of it. The whole idea is detachment, completely. You see, Buddha said, here's the problem. Buddha was a rich guy. His father was a ruler, and he had everything he needed and was kept in the palace. And one day he looked over the palace walls and said, I wonder what's out there. Went out and he saw men begging in the streets and said, why didn't Dad tell me about this? There's suffering in the world. I'm going to go figure out what it's all about. And he left all the pleasures of the palace to go out into the world and experience what the rest of humanity was experiencing. And finally one day he's sitting under the Bodhi tree and he says, Eureka, I've found it. This is it. The answer. Life is suffering. All is suffering. Suffering comes from desire. Kill desire, no more suffering. Case closed. Maya. There's no reality. It's in the mind. So if I don't think there's suffering, there isn't suffering. And if I can detach myself from everything that says there is suffering, there will be no suffering. Now this is so contrary to the Christian ethic. We're taught what? Do unto others, the Good Samaritan. We're taught to stop, to help, to intervene, to do things which change the lives of other people that help to make them better. So you can see how dangerous all of this is. Now the point is, if you're ministering deliverance to somebody, and they've got the demons that are behind all of this, then their thinking is clouded by this kind of philosophy. And so if you're dealing with somebody who's been involved in these things, you're going to deal with absolute, complete detachment. And you're going to have to do some inner healing to get them to reattach to reality and accept the fact of the material existence of an objective worldview. All right. So much material to cover here, but I need to move on. Let's move on to number 3 on the outline that you were given. Practical enticements to the Eastern worldview. There are dozens of things I could have picked on. I mean, literally dozens. But I can't pick on everything. So I've just chosen 3 of the most popular. All right? I'm going to do them backwards. Ayurvedic medicine. If you don't know what that is, you better figure it out, because a whole lot of people in the alternative health movement, the holistic health movement, are buying into it. And Mr. Deepak Chopra is the main progenitor of this philosophy. You know, the guru that Oprah made so famous. There are all kinds of alternative approaches to health and healing based in Ayurvedic medicine going back thousands of years in India. And I will tell you, you mess around with that stuff, you're going to get more disease, more sickness, and more illness than you ever thought you could have in your life. This stuff doesn't cure you, it kills you. Because you're not just buying into the modalities of therapy, you're buying into a philosophy. And the people who are treating you are likely committed to those philosophies. And the demons attached to that worldview are going to attach to you if you use those practices. Now let's throw a couple. Is a colonic a good idea? It's not a bad idea. If you've never had one, okay, so get yourself cleansed. But the problem with the approach of Ayurvedic medicine is that they are restoring a spiritual energy balance of your microcosmic body to the spiritual macrocosm of the cosmos so that you become at one with the Brahman. Now, chances are your basic, kooky, storefront, new age, Ayurvedic dispenser of Eastern philosophy is not going to tell you that when you walk in the door. May not even know that. But if it quacks like a duck, it's got webbed feet, and you're going to get the end result. Let's talk about meditation. Well, don't Christians believe in meditation? Absolutely. But this one requires a great deal of development that I'm not going to take time here this morning. So what's wrong if somebody wants to meditate? I mean, isn't sitting still and just thinking deep thoughts about the universe a healthy thing to do? Well, you know, Dr. Herbert Benson of Harvard and other people have done research into TM and other forms of meditation, and they've discovered, yes, there is a therapeutic benefit for people who meditate. Well, you know, let's get real here. There's a therapeutic benefit to anybody in our stressful world who just sits down for a few minutes and does nothing. All right? But to credit that to a religious system or a mantra that you paid thousands of dollars to get so you could chant in private and dare not tell anybody else what it is quite another matter. Christian meditation is quite different. Now, what does Joshua 1 say? I'm going to meditate on your law day and night. So let me give you a simple definition. so that I can move on to some other material. All Eastern meditation is designed to still, to silence, to shut down the senses, to detach you physically from every sensory experience of the objective world. It is a form of withdrawal from reality. Christian meditation, quite the contrary, is on the works, the Word, and the ways of God. You are meditating on something about someone. You're not sitting, look at your innie or your outie, and thinking deep thoughts about the mysteries of the cosmos. You're thinking about the law of God, the ways of God, the wonder of God, the majesty of God. That's real contemplative meditation. It's on Christ, His work at the cross, the things that He has done for us, to draw into deeper relationship with Him, to go out then into the world and do His good works on His behalf. But Eastern meditation is not to extend the realm of compassion, philanthropy, and humanitarianism. Eastern meditation is to pull back inward and to focus on the self. It is egoism at its worst. It is pride, spiritual pride, that makes you think if you have enough deep contemplative thoughts that you will understand you are God and be at one with all that is. A very different approach. So when somebody says, well, I meditate, I immediately say to them, how do you meditate? On what words do you meditate? What do you think when you meditate? Are you meditating to empty your mind or to fill your mind? Two very different approaches. Now, the one I'd love to spend about 3 hours on, but don't have the time to do that, is yoga. And in case you do not know it, there's a growing movement, particularly in North America today, of so-called Christian yoga, with folks wearing t-shirts saying, God is my guru. Now, first of all, the people who made those t-shirts obviously know nothing about Sanskrit language and the definition of a guru, let alone the definition of the term yoga, which in Sanskrit means, that's the Hindu language, yoked with God, in union with God. Now, if you read classic yoga texts, and I have read them, you will not find a single classic yoga text that says it's just a healthy form of exercise. They will all tell you the same thing. It is a pathway to spiritual enlightenment, to purposely put the body into postures where there is sensitivity to the realm of spirit. Now, is it possible to take yogic postures divorced from the context of an occult worldview and use them merely for physical therapeutic benefit? No. And I'd love to spend an hour explaining why to you, and I simply don't have the time to do that. Well, why can't I do that? Because you cannot make extant from the discipline that which has been specifically designed as a way to attenuate or to tune your body in to the spirit realm, which results in demonization. Let me give you an interesting illustration. I was working recently with a man who at one time was at the highest levels of transcendental meditation and was deeply involved in Eastern religions. I had done an exorcism on this man, and he was delivered marvelously from demonic forces. I wish I had time to tell you the whole story of his deliverance, because it was quite interesting. As I worked with him and was ministering to him, I didn't see the beginning anywhere, and the Lord spoke to me and told me what to do. And I do some strange things once in a while. Don't you do it, but I do. The guy's sitting there very calmly, and I just took the Bible and I went like that and just, ooh, that hurt. That illustration was a little too vivid there. No wonder that guy manifested. Anyway, I just whacked him in the center of the forehead. And he just blew off like a volcano. Not because I'd whacked him, because a demon manifested. How do you know I was there? Anybody know what I did? I hit the psychic third eye. I hit the seventh chakra. And when I hit the seventh chakra with the Word of God, Shiva showed up, which we'll talk about in a moment. And when Shiva showed up, he wasn't happy. And this guy said, ooh, wow. Well, anyway, he got delivered. Then he came to see me again recently. And he's just praising the Lord and telling me all the great things that are going on in his life. And I said, well, you're looking fit. Oh, yeah. He said, I'm yoga every day. Just help. I said, what? I said, you're still doing yoga? He said, oh, no. There's not something wrong with that, too, is there? And so I started to talk to him about it. And one of the things I said to him was that yoga is a form of spiritual radar. The Hindus took thousands of years. They didn't figure this out overnight. Understanding that the human body spatially, now this gets deep, and I can't get too deep with you here right now, has a place in the universe, and that the physical confines of the body, if put into certain positions, literally connect automatically with the spirit world. Now, I do stretching exercises every day, and they're wonderful. I recommend them. But they're very different from yogic postures. And this guy looked at me, and mind you, this guy spent more than 20 years at the top of TM, and he said, wow, I know exactly what you're talking about. And he went on to explain how in TM they were taught, and still do, that every building that they build, this is like the whole feng shui philosophy, every building that they build, every structure that they erect, every room that they furnish, every object, even the architectural design has to be done in a certain way to connect with spirit. I remember one time I was staying at an airport hotel. Really weird design, trapezoidal design. Never seen a design like this. And I was talking to a person who at that time was on the council of 9 of the Church of Satan. And I mentioned I was staying at that hotel, and he said, oh, you didn't know who's designed that hotel? And he named the Satanist who was an architect who designed that hotel. He said, couldn't you feel the energy when you were in there? I said, no, tell me about it. The whole hotel had been designed structurally to draw in demonic power. Now this can get, you're going to have tons of questions about this later probably. This is a whole thing I don't have time to get into in detail. Feng Shui, this is freebie. The Chinese art of arranging and designing rooms. Do you know when they built the Hong Kong Disneyland, that they had the thing built and then found out it hadn't been feng shuied properly and had to tear down half of it and rebuild it, because the feng shui masters had to come in and rearrange half of what they built because it wasn't properly aligned with the energies. So yoga is doing with your body what the Chinese do with feng shui, what the Satanists do with design. It's putting you into postures, most of them named after animals or Hindu gods, even though your American yogic instructor may not say that, to draw to you or to make you susceptible to the spirit realm. And we have Christians in church recreation halls who are twisting themselves into pretzel postures and breathing prana, vital breath, into them, which is all part, the whole breathing thing is all part of it. Establishing the rhythms of the so that you connect with the universal oneness. This stuff is absolutely deadly. Now let me tell you, you can spontaneously become demonized by doing yoga postures. You may not want the demon. You may not be looking for a demon. You may be a Christian who thinks you can't get one. But you will. Dangerous stuff. All right, I got to move on quickly. I'm almost out of time. In fact, I'm way over my time allotment for this. Real quickly, let's talk about the gods. Keeping in mind that many of you are interested in the realm of deliverance, these are the basic gods that you're going to run into. The Godhead. Hinduism has a whole unholy trinity. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, or sometimes spelled just S-I-V, Siva. You don't often run into Brahma. You'll occasionally run into Vishnu, but you will really run into Shiva. Creator, preserver, destroyer. That's how they're known. Brahma creates, Vishnu preserves, Shiva destroys. You say, well, why would somebody worship a God that destroys? Well, now think about the philosophy of reincarnation. Everything has to die to be reborn. Everything must be destroyed to come back in new form. I mean, they've really got this figured out, haven't they? So they can believe in a God of death and destruction. And we know who that is. John 10:10, he comes to steal, kill, destroy. I mean, the Bible names him Apollyon from the Revelation. What is the word Apollyon? The one from the pit. Destroyer. Apollyon is Shiva. So if you're dealing with somebody who's been into TM, into yoga, Ayurvedic medicine, reincarnation, any of these Eastern religious philosophies or Eastern religious cult offshoots, I always go for Shiva. Don't like to, but I do. Another one that you're going to run into a lot is the Kundalini. The Kundalini is the serpent snake. This is a kind of a crude drawing, but this is you. It's your head and your neck and your body, and can't see your legs because you're in a lotus position. Okay? All right. So this is your derriere. The base of the spine is chakra number 1. Chakra number 1 is where Kundalini resides, right there at the base of the spine. That's your coccyx. When you do yoga postures, all postures are designed to to awaken the chakras. All right? The 7 chakras. Now, there are 5 more up the spine. And as you progressively do yoga postures or meditation, the idea is that the Kundalini, which is called the serpent, it's a snake, rises up through these to the psychic third eye. Well, no, you should look like this. Because you're going to be very sad. And when this happens, the Kundalini power, known as the goddess Shakti, has sex with Shiva, and that psychosexual union leads to enlightenment and bliss. That's the purpose of yoga. That's really what it's all about. And you talk to people who are really into yoga. Now, I know you're American or Christian instructor. I mean, I initially talk about the chakras. They may just breathe in the prana, the vital breath, or do the breathing rhythmic thing along with the postures. But it's all headed somewhere. It's all headed to here. So these two demons unite, and then you're in really big trouble. The other one I want to mention to you, the really nasty one, is Kali. Kali, as some say. Kali is the Indian way of pronouncing it. Who is Kali? Kali is the nastiest, most pervasive demon involved in Hindu and Eastern cultures. This is the one you will run into the most. Kali, and some of you have heard me teach on this, is Jezebel. Kali is Jezebel. And if you haven't heard me describe Kali, you travel across India, you see statues of Kali everywhere. Totally black, big bulging eyes. She wears a necklace of human skulls around her neck of all her decapitated lovers. She stands holding a sword in one hand, a bloody severed hand in the other, and her foot is on the corpse of her beheaded lover. And what Kali does is she seduces her lovers, and at the moment of orgasm, chops their head off. Not exactly somebody you want to bring home to mom. This is not a chick date. Nasty demon. And when you deal with people in Eastern cultures, you're going to find a lot of Kali. Love to talk about Kali sometime to you, because if you haven't met, how many of you in deliverance have met Kali? Some of you have, because you've been involved in this ministry and know about it. Really nasty. Oh man. You got Jezebel on steroids on your hands when you do. All right, now, people want to get free from all this stuff quickly. I'm going to do the sprint toward the finish line now and wrap up this session this morning. What do they have to renounce? They have to renounce every discipline they've been involved in. Whatever it is, be very specific. Renounce the prana, renounce the positions, renounce the yoga, renounce the meditation. If you're in TM, they must, and we'll get into this in a moment, deal with their karma. They must deal with detachment. They must go through inner healing and reattach to reality and the physical universe. They must renounce the philosophy of detachment. They must renounce all mantras. These are the words, phrases, syllables that are given to you in practices like TM that you chant over and over and over and over and over and over to shut down the senses and go into the meditative states. Any chants that they've done, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, 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 Hare Krishna, etc. And any homage that they paid in temples. Now, I've been in a number of Hindu temples doing research, but I don't pay homage. And the one thing you never do is take the sign of Shiva in the center of the forehead, which is basically a beauty mark in Eastern culture now. You know, they put beauty marks there. But every time you go in the Hindu temple, the priest is there with ash, and he wants to mark you with the sign of Shiva, because you're marked with Shiva from that point onward. And you go into a Hindu, and I have people who, only been tourists. Oh, let's go in this Buddhist temple, and let's look at Buddha. Oh, let's go look at this. Well, it's okay if you're a blood-bought Christian, you want to do a little research, that's fine. If you're Bob Larson, you're going to write a 575-page book, I don't have a problem. Otherwise, I might have an issue with it. But let's say you're a pastor, you're in ministry, and you really want to study this stuff. I don't have a problem, but you pray, you put the blood of Christ on you, you go in there and you deal with it. Now, some people just, don't want to do that. And I respect that and I understand that. But you better get yourself cleaned up afterwards, and you better not pay homage to any of those idols, and you better not give a tip to the priest, and you better not take any markings on you, all right? You've got to renounce every cult when you come out of this. You're trying to get somebody free. If they've been specifically involved in a certain cult, they must renounce that cult. And finally, they have to renounce all their gurus. You know, I mentioned a moment ago these t-shirts, God is my guru. I'm sorry, but that's just really inane. No, it's stupid. No, it's idiocy. God is not a guru. What does the term guru mean? It's like saying Jesus is a law. No, he's not. God's not a guru. A guru, the definition of a guru, is a self-God realized being. A guru is somebody who, through the ascetic, disciplinary process of Hinduism, has sufficiently detached from reality to realize that they, as a human, are God. Don't these people have dictionaries before they make t-shirts? Don't they ask fundamental questions before we borrow language from a pagan religion and put it in a church? I mean, this is plain stupid. I mean, there's no way to be kind about this. And if you put that t-shirt on, you've given a legal right for a demon to attach to you. Because you have, whether you know it or not, you have implicitly consented to a demonic philosophy of spiritual realization. You know, you get me started on this subject, it is hard to shut me up. Because there's just so much. I mean, that's why I want you to get the book. There's a single person who, before you leave, should leave without Larson's book of world religions. And study it, and read it, and know this stuff in depth. So much more I wanted to talk to you about this morning, didn't have time for. But I hope this has given you a fundamental understanding of the dangers we're up against in the demonic realm of dealing with the spirits of Eastern religion. The practical aspects of breaking curses, pulling down spiritual strongholds, and removing the legal rights of Satan. Set yourself, your friends, and family free by enrolling in the International School of Exorcism. In our new book, Set Your Family Free, we teach how to raise children with purity principles, how to prepare them for adulthood, and how to break every assignment of Satan over their lives.
We give you the principles of spiritual warfare to fight for your family and to be victorious over the powers of darkness.
This is the book that will set your family free. How do you know if your problems are the result of bad life choices or demons? My 200-page book, Dealing with Demons, has answers for questions most are afraid to ask. Can Christians be demon-possessed? How can I know what's natural and what's supernatural? Dealing with Demons will teach you how to recognize symptoms that the devil is at work in your life. Be one step closer to living in spiritual victory. The most frequent demon that I deal with is the spirit of Jezebel. This demon wants to destroy your health, your finances, your marriage, your family, and your church. My book, Jezebel, is your key to overcoming the most prevalent evil spirit of our age. Get your copy today.
He took the curses away from me. Was he Bob Larson? Because he can help you.
If your life isn't all that it should be, if relationships aren't working, if your health, your finances, or your spiritual life are unhappy, schedule a personal one-on-one encounter with me. We'll get to the root of the issues that are holding you back. We'll give you answers and a whole new direction in life.
Oh, what a change, what a difference when you have an encounter with God.
Take action. I look forward to seeing you soon.
encourage your support for this worldwide outreach to do what Jesus did. For the latest information on resources, seminars, conferences, training institutes, retreats, and international missions, go to boblarson.org. Thank you for your prayers and financial partnership.